for 6 months, and it was very productive and fascinating.
Okie dokie then. Let me stop that. Stop. Phone problems. I did a film a couple weeks ago about camera reviews, which proved to be quite popular because I knew if I put anything about a camera in it, it was clickbait, people, and you fell for it. But no, not really. I was giving a sort of an honest take on what I think about most camera reviews. And in the process of that, I stumbled across a film that I wanted to bring your attention to. And I have a bunch of reasons that I have actually written in paper with my mechanical pencil, by the way. Did I tell you I have a fetish? I have a problem with mechanical pencils. I do. I love them. Whoever invented the mechanical pencil is a god, is a genius. And I just bought a new one that rotates the ink automatically while you're writing, so you never get that sharp edge with the mechanical pencil. It's brilliant and it works. This is a film about Leica. And this is a film about this one person I want to bring your attention to. And I'm going to both commend Leica and I'm going to condemn Leica because I can, and it's my channel. But before I do that, I want to tell you a story because it's very important to set the stage here so that you know when I'm condemning Leica, it's not from a place of maliciousness, it's from a place of love. I bought my first Leica M4P in a 28mm in 1989 or 1990 at the San Antonio, Texas, San Antonio Camera Exchange. So my father's father, my grandfather, was a newspaper columnist. And he never made a lot of money, but in the community that he wrote for, he was famous. You couldn't go anywhere with him without everyone walking up and saying, hey, how you doing? What's happening? Love the column. And he wrote this column called Lines and Angles. And I think it was for about 30 years he wrote this column. Now, when I was a kid, my grandfather had a white Mercedes, four-door white Mercedes, which where we lived was a complete anomaly. There were no Mercedes. There were pickup trucks. But my grandfather had this white Mercedes, four-door, brown leather interior, beautiful. I just found out 6 months ago that that car was purchased by his readers as a present when he retired as a thank you. So that tells you how sort of successful this column was. He and my father did not get along. In fact, they were oil and water, and it was rough. My grandparents did not treat my father particularly well. They forced him into military school. They never got along. So when I came along and said, I'm interested in journalism, my father was not too happy. My father said, forget journalism. Photography is a hobby. It's not a job. You should be an investment banker. I remember exactly where we were on the highway when he told me this. So he said, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to put $3,000 in a bank account, and I'm going to teach you how to invest. And I was like, great, no problem. Just let me know when the money's there. The second I got access to that money, I withdrew all of it and went down and bought the M4P in a 28. And my father was pissed, but he also realized I wasn't messing around, that this was not a hobby for me, that this was something I knew that I was driven to do and I wanted to do. And it sort of proved to him that point, and he left me alone. Leica was with me. I knew the second I got my hands on that camera that it was built for the kind of photography that I wanted to do. I had other camera systems. I started with Nikon and went to Canon. I've had Pentax and Hasselblad and a zillion other Nikon cameras, a zillion other kinds. I got Voigtlanders and Holgas and 4x5s and Pentaxes and Fuji 6.9s, and it goes on and on and on. But there was something about the Leica. The Leica to me, the rangefinder Leicas, again, starting with my M4P, going to M6s, M4s, that camera is completely unique. It is the worst camera in the world for about 99% of the things that you may want to photograph. Would I use this as a portrait camera? No. Would I use this to shoot sports? No. Would I use it to shoot fashion? No. The one thing that this camera is built for is reportage. And for that purpose, it is, in my opinion, potentially the best thing that's ever been built. I was gonna title this film Boy Plus Leica, Girl Plus Leica. But then I was like, somebody's gonna get ticked off about that for some God knows what reason. So maybe I won't do that. I don't even know what I'm gonna title this film, actually. I think historically, the concept of human being with Leica and curiosity investigating a story, that storyline in the history of photography the Leica rangefinder camera is probably the most significant camera ever built. Now, you could argue the Nikon F series, F1, F2, F3, that kind of thing, but for a single style of camera, that lone person out in the world investigating a story, often by themselves. Gene Smith, country doctor. Gene Smith, Spanish Civil War. This goes on and on. I'll read you some names here. I made a list here. Gene Smith, Sebastião Salgado, Catherine Leroy's coverage of Vietnam getting captured by the NVA, convincing the NVA not only not to execute her, but to let her photograph, which made the cover of Life magazine, won her the Leica Reportage Award. I forget the name of the award, but Catherine Leroy, got to meet her before her death when she died in LA. Man, talk about a feisty woman. Not to mention her coverage of the Middle East. Unbelievable, Leica. Mary Ellen Mark, got to hang out with her, got to teach a book workshop, a blurb workshop to her workshop. Mary Ellen Mark always had a Leica around her neck. Larry Towell, Maggie Stieber, Thomas Kern, who's a Swiss photographer you may or may not know about. Jean Gaumy, Bruce Gilden, Gilles Perez, Abbas, Trent Park. Leica rangefinder cameras. The single most important, probably recording device in the history of poignant moments since the advent of photography. And I know that was a heavy statement. Let's just take a moment to let that sink in. So this is my praise of Leica. We'll get to maybe the kind of condemnation here in a minute, but I want to keep this as positive as possible. So I'm trolling the internet for no reason, mindlessly scrolling, which I've told you not to do. No, I was doing a little research on the camera review film I did, and I come across this film from Leica. Normally when I see that Leica emblem floating into the top of a film, it these days doesn't necessarily make me want to watch what's coming, because Leica is kind of like the rest of the brands right now. This is my opinion, by the way. Leica seems to be catering to the squeaky wheel, right? You see them focusing on people and featuring people that you're like, never heard of this person. And then you see the work and you go, this work is not very good. Like, why is this person being featured? And then it turns out that they probably have some sort of methodology in building following or building audience. And again, they're kind of pandering to the squeaky wheel. I get it. All the brands are doing it. Some are far worse than others. I think Sony right now is actually doing a really good job. I think some of the folks that they're sponsoring are legit high-end, amazing people. Fuji does a little bit with these high-end people and a lot with people I've never heard of that I have no concept of how they could ever get sponsored. If they do, I'm even featured. And frankly, people, I don't want sponsorship. I really don't. I have way too much going on in my life to really take on anything else. So a camera sponsorship or getting free equipment to make YouTube films about that is not of interest to me whatsoever. So it's not like I'm asking for stuff. It's just bizarre to me. And when I find something that is worthy of your time, which is about what this film is about, when I find something worthy of your time, I'm just trying to point it out because I want to give you a little window into my perspective as to why something like this is relevant and should be relevant to you in a way that goes far beyond some subpar photographer talking about features of a camera that they were loaned for a short amount of time and then had to give back because the thing's $10,000, which is the vast majority of what I see coming out. So as I'm looking around, I see this very innocent Leica logo come into the center of the film, but instead of seeing like some bad street photography somewhere, I see an interview, and something catches my eye. LOBA, which is the Leica Oscar Barnack Award. And in this case, it is the Newcomer Award. And the person in question is a guy whose name I am going to butcher. And I have no concept. He's a German kid who did a project in Siberia. And his name is Emile, E-M-I-L-E, D-U-C-K-E. Now that could be Emile, it could be Emile, it could be Ducke, Ducke. I have no idea how to pronounce his name, so I apologize for that. But he is very much worth your attention, and you should watch this film. Is this a technical camera review film? No. In fact, I don't know if he even used Leica to make the pictures in this story. I think he was awarded the prize, and I think Leica probably in part of that prize was being gifted a Leica of some sort. I think in this case it's a Leica Q2. I have no idea what he made this work with. It's irrelevant. You've got to tip your hat and salute Leica, number one, for offering the Leica Oscar Barnack Award, and number two, adding a secondary piece of that award, which is the Newcomer Award, which is to say, hey, this is a young photographer who's actually done something really good, and we should pay attention to it. And there's a few things about this that I want, when you watch this film, there's a couple of things to note, because this is not common. This is the kind of work and the kind of project and the kind of photographer that should be receiving the highest level of support that a camera company can give. The problem is, and my guess is, these kind of photographers who are doing this kind of work and these kind of stories are probably in the bottom 5%. I think this kid is an outlier. And when I say kid, I mean that affectionately. I'm probably 30 years older than him, and he's already way better than I ever was or will be. And he's already done an amazing project, which you're going to see in this film, which is, I think, amazingly good. But I want to talk about what I think is particularly good about it. And there's a few things about him that are impressive and critical. He speaks English, German, and Russian. So clearly, he's an educated man. Now I really hate him. Let's listen. Let me break down this. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 12 things I want to talk about. He's soft-spoken. He does not seem like, this is number one, by the way, even though I didn't number these, because I did it in, did I mention my mechanical pencil fetish? Because it's real, and I used a mechanical pencil here, and I can actually read my writing, which is kind of a novelty. He's soft-spoken, he does not seem egotistical, and he breaks down the background of this project. And for all the times that I've heard younger photographers say to me, well, I don't do research. I can't, because I can't tarnish the thoughts in my head. All of that is BS and laziness and ego. If you're not doing your research, you're really not doing projects, and you're not doing yourself justice or the story justice, not knowing your history or context. So he speaks very well about what he's doing. And I've mentioned that a million times in my Dear Photographer films, that if you're going to be a photographer, when someone asks you what you do or what you're doing, you've got to have about a 15 to 20 second elevator pitch that is eloquent, straight to the point, and there's no fat. And so the way he speaks about his work is very important. I mentioned this. Number two, he speaks multiple languages. Here in America, a second language it feels like Mount Everest to most people, and I kind of butcher a second language, but I'm nowhere near being fluent in 3, and so I'm jealous of him, and that is an incredible arrow in your quiver when it comes to doing projects around the world. Now, he speaks English, German, and Russian, which might be a little bit more limited than, say, knowing English, Spanish, and French. Those are probably more widespread, but that's arguable. Number 3, he mentions doing, wait for it, traumatic for a lot of snowflakes out there, wait for it. He mentions doing research. He mentions talking to historians and doing the research. People, this is step one. If you're not doing the research, you are not doing photography at the level you should. I do not want to hear excuses. I don't want to hear reasons why you don't do research. If you're not doing research, you're not legit in my mind. Sorry, I know that's harsh. I know there's a little tough love here for people, and that's not what YouTube is about unless you come to the MILNOR channel. And this is about, yeah, that's what this channel is about. Research. That allows him to speak about history and context, because the story he's doing, The Road of Bones in Siberia, is a fascinating and terrifying story. And he talks about how the history and the lineage and the knowledge is being twisted, like many things in the modern era. A lot of people consider that we're now living in what's called the post-truth society, where there's no such thing as math, science, truth, and fact, that everybody just melds whatever story they want in whatever direction to make themselves feel good. He talks about context. That is so refreshing. And again, Leica, well done, offering the award. He's being interviewed where the work is being exhibited, which my guess is at a Leica office somewhere. It's beautiful, prints on the wall, fantastic, good job. He talks about having a driver. You could also intermix the word fixer in there, which is someone on the ground who's helping him facilitate pictures. Not most, but many of the top documentary projects being done are often a small team of people. It could be a translator, a driver, a fixer, combination of those. I thought that was a nice touch, talking about that, meaning that he's got support in the field. He makes what I would call intimate pictures. And there's a certain ingredient of his work that I think is very important and something you should note. When you look at the essay that he's produced, you'll see long lens, not necessarily long lens images, but images that were made from a distance, what I would call a far distance, and there's a bit of compression going on, cityscape kind of pictures at night, light in the sky, but the sun's not up, showing the sort of steam rising, how cold this is in Siberia. He's got wide-angle images. He's got static images of structures and architecture that's along this road of bones. The sweet spot for me, and this is where you separate the men from the boys, the girls from the women, his middle distance work. The middle distance, there's a picture that pops up a couple of times in the film, which is him standing in front of a crowd of people. There's probably 20 people in the crowd, women and men, some close, some middle, some far. He is directly in front of these people shooting. That is not easy wherever you are. There's always a moment of awkwardness because someone in that crowd, without saying it, they're saying it with their eyes, is saying, who the heck are you and why are you making pictures of me? And chances are there's somebody in that crowd that's saying, I don't want to be photographed. And so what are you doing? Like, what's happening here? You have to get in, get out, frame that. And that picture to me is a signifier of the skill level that he has. The next point is that those middle distance images are consistent. And I'm putting this together just by seeing what's shown in the film. I have not seen the actual body of work outside of that. I've not seen it in book form. I'm just looking at what's in this film. The middle distance pictures, so images that have 2, 3, 4 people in them from inside of buildings and structures, shot from a middle distance, so not wide angle on top of people and not back with a long lens. This is the sweet spot, and frankly, to me, it's the sweet spot of the Leica system. This is where the system shines. This kid has obviously had an education in photography, and my guess is he's had an education in art history because his images look like paintings. They are those middle distance interior images are absolutely gorgeous. That is a combination of his ability to see light, his ability to frame and know that you don't have to be on top of people. That's the perfect opportunity for, let's say, a 50mm lens. The 50 works perfectly. I have no idea what he's shooting. Again, could be a zoom for all I know on a Canon. They look like paintings. That to me screams of an education in photography and a knowledge that goes outside of pressing the button. That is a knowledge about light. That is a knowledge about chiaroscuro, things like that, light and dark and pairing. And also his manipulation of the files after the fact, which is not heavy-handed, is beautiful and the tonality is fantastic. If I could make my work look like that, I'd be stoked, man, to use an American, kind of a rednecky term, stoked. Even though stoked is associated with surfing, I think it transcends over into like that Southern California redneck community, which by the way is a pretty vibrant redneck community. You don't have to go to like Kentucky or Texas to find rednecks. They're all over the place here. We're an equal opportunity provider. This kid can tell a story. This is the next point. Wide, tight, middle distance, portraits, details. There's a couple of drone shots, which I don't need. And I get it because you're talking about road of bones. You're showing the geography of what you're at, the topography. I understand why someone would do that. I don't need to see those drone images. That's one of the things that I would, if it was me, I would probably pull those out because they're kind of like candy to me and they're not critical in my mind unless I'm missing something, and that's a legitimate possibility. The next point is that he is working in brutal conditions. And this is, it complicates things exponentially. I did a shoot last week. It was 25 degrees. And my hands got so cold, even in the gloves, because I had to take the gloves on and off. I would say by 8 o'clock in the morning, it was just like dead wood. I couldn't even feel it. And then my hands burned for like an hour afterwards. This kid is working in Siberia. That made my shoot last week look like ginger beer. It was like, this kid is working in harsh, harsh conditions, which magnifies everything. Just think about this. Just think about layering up for a Siberian morning. And then the driver goes, hey, we got access to this other thing, gotta go. And then you have to go inside. Everything steams up. Suddenly you're just pouring sweat, trying to take your layers off as fast as possible. And then the driver goes, all right, man, that's it. We lost our access. Let's go. We gotta get back on the road. Then you gotta put all that back on. That's where a small light camera system comes in super handy because then you're not schlepping like bags of stuff that you don't need. Next point is this story in this interview is being presented, he's being interviewed in a gallery where the work is printed and on the wall. That means that there was a curator involved. That means it could have been him. He could have been double down, double agent as a photographer and curator. My guess is there was someone else at Leica that runs that gallery space that was probably involved in the curation, the editing, the layout, the print size, the copy, the captions, all of the thing that goes into a professional exhibition. Again, kudos to Leica for doing this. They don't have to. Leica's, I think, doing fairly well as a company. They don't have to do the Leica Barnack Award, Newcomer Award, and give this kid a camera and support. They don't have to, but they do. And that's a very cool thing. The last thing I want to say about this is it's a long film. In modern standards, it's 7 minutes long. And they actually let him talk. And he is eloquent, and he's quiet, and he's mellow. And that is such a refreshing change from, I'll just go ahead and say it, the blowhards out there, the squeaky wheels, who do a lot of like really fancy editing tricks and make noise and talk about sensors. And then it's like an empty calorie. It's like eating a candy bar and then trying to lift weights. And like the first set, you're like, I feel like I'm Flash Gordon. And then you just feel like Bob Gordon, the guy that lives down the street that barbecues 4 nights a week. And you're like, this isn't working for me. They let this kid speak, they let this kid tell his story. You know why? Because he actually has something to say. This kid did a really good story, and it has ties to his family. It has ties to his education. It has ties to his interest. He did the research. He has context. And the last thing I'm going to say about this, and by the way, I have no affiliation with Leica whatsoever. I'm just throwing them a bone because they deserve it, and so does this kid. He talks about revisiting the story in 10 years. That's cool. That's the kind of photographer I want to see in the world. That's the kind of young photographer that I look at and say, this kid has a chance at a career. Not a flash in the pan, hot on YouTube for 18 months and then disappears because the DEA comes and busts them, or the ATF or whatever. It could happen. I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm making it up. This is cool. I was stoked to see this review. For every one of reviews like this that I see, and again, I don't think there's any mention of camera equipment in this film until the very end when he says something, which I'm sure Leica asked him to say, which is, I think it was like, hey, you know, thanks, I can't wait to go into the world with the Q2. I don't fault him for that. Like, you know, you just got supported by this company, and who knows, the Q2 maybe actually seems like a pretty good camera for him. Because the kind of work he's doing. I think it would be a nice addition, and maybe it's the camera that he carries when he's not carrying his other stuff. I don't know. I don't know him. And again, I don't know how to pronounce his name, so if I bungled that, I apologize. But this is a review that I think is worth your time, and it's the kind of review that I'm going to continue. Anytime I find something in photography that's online that I think is relevant, I think I'm going to start doing films about it, because it's kind of awful after a while to see things being promoted that are just not worth being promoted. And they're being promoted again for all the wrong reasons. And so when I find something being promoted for the right reasons, I kind of feel it my civic duty as an American to bring it to your attention. So I hope that was helpful. And I hope this kid gets all the publicity and praise. And I really hope he gets a book deal. I would like to see this in book form. I'd love to see a really good editor, a sequencer, a designer really get their hands on this work and see. And then it's solidified for history and shows up in libraries, and like some kid somewhere is going to open it up and be like, wow, have their mind blown. And then they're going to be next in line to follow what this kid has done. I'll be back.